bishop was invited to make a stop at a Catholic nursing home as he wanted to pray for and share his wisdom with the residents of the facility. As he entered the lobby, he saw a 90-year-old woman sitting in a wheelchair. He faced her and asked her, "Do you know who I am?" She said, "Sir, if you don't know who you are, go to the front desk and ask the receptionist." It's always better to know who you are before visiting folks like us. In today's gospel, we have one of the most important texts that fortifies the structure of the Catholic Church. It is, of course, the great confession of Peter's faith in Christ's declaration, "You are Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church." Who would have believed in the days of Jesus that Peter, a simple fisherman, would become the leader of the greatest church in the world, the Roman Catholic Church? Who would have believed that Jesus would pick Peter, knowing in advance that Peter would deny knowing him on 3 different occasions? Christ knew very well that the community must remain one, sharing one faith, one Lord, one baptism, that there had to be one visible leader. Without a strong, recognized, and universal leader, there was to bind the church together. Every apostle would have been tempted to establish an independent ministry or church. Jesus could not have prayed for the unity of the church without laying the foundation of unity, which lies in true leadership. Leadership goes with authority, and so Jesus said to Peter, "I will give you the keys to the kingdom of heaven, and whatever you bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven." Thus, Peter was appointed the first pope of our church. The keys of St. Peter have been handed down through the years to his successors, the popes, who work in collaboration with the bishops, who are considered the magisterium, who are the teaching authority of our church. Their mission is to teach all nations and to preach the gospel to every creature. All the apostles recognized that Peter was given the charism, the gift and the grace to lead the church. And Peter realized that he had to take his position of leadership to the center of the known world at that time, Rome. We know that Peter preached the words of Jesus, that eventually he died in Rome, requesting that he be crucified upside down. We also know that when Peter died, the charism he was given to lead the church remained active in Rome. The ones who took his place, St. Linus and those who followed him, St. Cletus, St. Clement, St. Alexander, St. Sextus, and so forth, were all recognized as having received the gift of grace that the Lord had given Peter to lead our church. As time went on, these bishops of Rome would be given titles: Pope, Papa, the Holy Father, Pontiff, leader of the church. There have been a total of 267 popes elected to lead our church. We don't know much about the leadership skills or styles of the popes in the early ages of our church history, but effective and graceful leadership has been an important quality that continues to guide those who shepherd our church today. So what does this mean to us? It means that the charism of Peter lives on in the Catholic Church. This leadership is experienced in the teachings of the Holy Father and the teaching authority of the church. It means that we know that as Catholics, our belief comes from the Bible and related scriptures. Now, how do we see this quality of leadership expressed in our world? We can look at 2 recent examples of elected leaders that have clearly influenced the priorities of our church. It was said that Pope Francis managed to electrify an audience far bigger than the world's 1.2 billion Catholics. And he did it by invoking a special trinity: style, message, and mission. Several of his leadership qualities that influenced his papacy were these. He clearly practiced patience. Pope Francis quietly approved rules to bring more transparency to the Vatican's inner workings, which had long operated without a central budget or a clear accounting system. He fostered open dialogue. Pope Francis' first big shot at reform was to create the Vatican VIII. This was a council of 8 cardinals from regions around the world. Their goal to give advice on how to open up the church's hierarchy and listen to more of the faithful. He gave employees his blessing. On New Year's Eve in 2014, 5 nuns in a Spanish convent received a surprise voicemail. It was from Pope Francis, who wished them a Happy New Year and left a message of affection, health, and blessing. The sisters were thrilled. A few hours later, Francis called back and encouraged them to never lose hope and keep up their good work. Pope Francis knew when to be assertive. The pontiff was soft-spoken and polite, as we saw quite often. But that was not to be confused with being a pushover. After all, he was a nightclub bouncer before he entered the priesthood. I didn't know that either. That was cool. Early in the Pope's term, he set out to reform the Vatican Bank, which was no small task. Being too authoritarian can backfire. People may comply with what you dictate, but they don't necessarily fully commit to it. Pope Francis skipped over power struggles and focused on the better good. Jorge Mario Bergoglio, Pope Francis's birth name, was the runner-up to the Pope in 2005. After 3 ballots, it was clear that he couldn't win. Joseph Ratzinger, who would become Pope in Benedict XIV, only needed 5 more votes to be elected. Bergoglio reportedly convinced the cardinal electors to vote for Ratzinger. Why? He didn't want to fight it out with Ratzinger and further divide our church. And finally, Pope Francis stayed humble. Above all else, Pope Francis won the admiration for his humility and simple living. He chose the papal name in honor of to honor Saint Francis of Assisi, who championed the poor. And he chose to forego much of the pomp and circumstance of his powerful position. He lived in the Vatican guest house his entire papacy, rather than the traditional papal apartments in the apostolic palace, reflecting his preference for a simpler lifestyle. Then, the May of last year, we elected a new pontiff who also happened to be the first pope born in the United States. Pope Leo XIV has distinguished himself from his predecessors through a deliberate, formal, and analytical approach to leadership that contrasts with the charismatic, improvisational style of Pope Francis. While both popes share similar priorities, observers note that Pope Leo leans to his background as a canon lawyer and as a mathematician, maintaining a more cautious and measured presence in his public communication and in his governance style. Pope Leo XIV's leadership doesn't seek the spotlight. He listens, he steadies, and he sacrifices. For his 3 decades of living and serving the poor in Peru, his administrative role within the church, and his commitment to social justice reflect a leader who prioritizes the well-being of others over personal comfort or recognition. This approach aligns with the concept of servant leadership, where the leader's primary goal is to serve. For example, in a 2020 post on social media from Bishop Provost, who later became Pope Leo XIV, he called on the leaders of the church to reject racism and to seek justice. This obviously continues to be a doctrine that we need to seek in our communities and neighborhoods today. Years ago, I was put in a leadership position before I was convinced that I was ready to actually handle all the responsibilities of that task. An old friend offered me some sound advice. He said the difference between good managers and good leaders is that good managers want to do things right, while good leaders want to do the right thing. I still respect that message in my work today. As we examine styles of leadership that affect our lives as Catholics and as Americans, we can examine how different leaders' actions impact our families, our work, and our world. Leaders in America are shaping daily life through significant shifts in economic policy, technological acceleration, hiring trends, political corruption, immigration reform, climate change, and government regulations. So we might ask ourselves, what guides our personal and moral leadership styles as a Catholic, as a parent, as a spouse, as an employee, as a parishioner, and as a friend? Next month, marks 30 years since I was ordained a deacon in the Catholic Church. When I lived in the Twin Cities, the archbishops were brilliant leaders for the Archdiocese of Minneapolis-St. Paul. When I lived in Washington, D.C., the cardinal there was very inspiring in his leadership of the Catholics in the Washington, D.C. area. And now here in Arizona, I've been really inspired by the leaderships of Bishops Dolan and Olmsted and how they can be shepherds for our lives and our church today. Upon reflecting on the gospel passage, may we keep Pope Leo and our bishops in prayer. May they be given the graces and the gifts they need to live out their calling in such a way as to truly reflect the message of Jesus. Our spiritual care is entrusted to them. May our church leaders walk with Christ, who will help them with the important responsibility and guide them to be good shepherds. And finally, may we be blessed to be faithful members of the flock, attending to the voice, the presence, and the cares of those who lead us.